Hello, welcome to Coffee with Kathleen. Today, I am debuting my Slay mug. And there is a reason for this. It's because the person that I'm talking to today, I'm so excited, is a leader on my own team. I really love showcasing female leaders on this podcast, as you know. And I have a great number of them that I'm privileged to work with on a daily basis. And this is one of them. So I'm super excited to introduce you to Subrina Shriram.
Hi.
Hello. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
It is exciting.
Nice.
And your first podcast ever.
My first podcast ever. This may be like a new career for me. Who knows?
I think so. I mean, so what everybody doesn't maybe know about you that's watching is how fantastic and fabulous you are and how fun all of your opinions are. So yeah, I think we could do a whole different series. Honestly, that would be great. But of course, here on this podcast, we're talking about businessy type stuff, leadership, that kind of thing. So why don't you tell everybody kind of a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So I have been with RepairPal since 2021 and now acquired by Yelp, so part of Yelp. And my role has evolved since I started. When I first started, I came in as more of a sales operations, Salesforce administrator, that sort of role, kind of staying in the sales and customer service, marketing, tech stack area. So basically all the tools that people use on a daily basis was under my umbrella. And then as I, evolved in my role and as you kind of saw some more potential in me, which I appreciate, IT soon followed. So IT went under my umbrella, and basically anything technical, anything that anybody would turn on became under my umbrella, which is very, very exciting. So still doing all of that because, even though we're acquired by Yelp, we're still working towards integrating all of our tools and tech stack. So right now, what I'm doing is integrating everything that we have, or trying to integrate, or seeing if it makes sense to integrate our tools. I'm deeply passionate about the non-glamorous side of the business, which I think is really funny. I'm usually behind the scenes, and I kind of am back here trying to make sure. I think it's really important for people to, be able to do their jobs, right? Salespeople being, understanding, how do I sell? What tools do I need? Customer service, marketing. If I can take a little bit away from the what if, or how do I do this, or how do I do that, to make their jobs a little easier, and then they could be a little bit more productive, that's a win for me, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense. And I think that's why you've been so wildly successful, well, before RepairPal, but also at RepairPal and now Yelp. And of course, as Yelp takes over more and more of the sort of business operations and IT stuff, we're going to use your skills as a project manager, actually in a little bit more of an externally facing role with some of our partners and things like that, which I'm really excited for you to step into that. So talk a little bit about, how did you decide that, project management, operations, rollouts, product management, all that, how did you decide that was your passion?
Well, you know what? Probably very early on in my career. So obviously I've worked in products for years. I still love product management. I worked in sales ops for about 10 years. And the first time that I had to do a huge implementation was when we switched from the CRM, the client relationship management tool that we were using, to Salesforce. And it just was something that, and it sounds so funny because most people could care less about all of these things. And when I was working through that implementation at the company that I was at the time, it was honestly one of the highlights of my career, because we had to figure out how to move all of our data, how, train all of our people on how to use this new tool, and really do it in a pretty quick time period, right? Because, you can't stop business. Still has to go. The bottom line still has to, be in the green, right? So it was honestly life-changing for me. So I really fell in love with Salesforce. I fell in love with the CRM, and I fell in love with implementations. And then with that, all of a sudden, which is a plus and a minus. Once you get all of these fancy CRMs, you all of a sudden need all of these tools to plug into it, right? So then you're like, okay, well, you're there assessing, does it make sense to do this? How much will it save my team? How much more productive will it make my team? How much more money will this make us, right? How much happier will my team be if they had this? Right? You take all of these things into consideration, and then, you start working on it. But again, this is not the glamorous side of the business. It's not, you're not making the big sales. You're not, doing all of the, the things that kind of make the news, but you're making sure your team is taken care of. And it just, I just loved being the go-to person. I love being there to answer questions and helping people along the way. And I just love people. I'm just a people person. They just energize me, invigorate me. And so, to get things done well enough, perfection is the enemy of good, but to make things a little bit more productive, it just, you can tell it just is my thing. And then organization as well. So all of that, all of the above.
Yeah, you are a model when it comes to organization. Like, I wish that I could be as organized as you are. I'm very much not. I aspire to be. And then I go to like office supply stores, and when I see things are like so nicely organized, or like I look at planners. In fact, I buy planners. I just bought another one. I don't know why I need all these physical planners. But it had this list making thing inside that I was like, ooh, this is really like a sexy list making thing. But then I don't necessarily use all these things. Instead, I just try to surround myself with really organized people, and then things kind of work out. So I appreciate very much this about you. And like I've known from the beginning how spectacular you were. I only needed one phone conversation, and then I was like, please come to work with us. Because
I appreciate that. I remember that phone conversation very well. So,
and I have been looking for somebody for a while. Mm-hmm. I had turned a lot of people down. I was like, the right person is going to come along. I know it. And I'm waiting for that. And then we started talking, and I'm like, this is it. It's her. She's the one. She's the only one. Yeah, I just needed you to join right away. So I wanted you to know that you were necessary. So yeah, I'm super happy that you did. It's worked out great. But, I wonder sometimes, because you are helping so many people, and I know you love people. I do too. Mm-hmm. But, people can be difficult to work with, all of that, or, different groups have different opposing needs. And then you've got to prioritize, like, who you're going to get done first, second, third, et cetera. When you're providing technical support, people can especially be difficult because things don't work. But you are the most persistently positive person, particularly inside of a professional environment, I think I've ever met. So where does that come from? How do you maintain that?
Well, thank you. That's like a huge compliment. So I appreciate that. And, honestly, it comes from, number one, it comes from gratitude, right? When I told you this, when I came to RepairPal and I met with you, I remember meeting with you and Jamie very vividly. And there were a couple of other jobs that were in play. And then I just remember the conversation that I had with you, and how I felt with you, and how I felt with Jamie. And I said, I want to feel like this. I want to be in a company where there's amazing female leadership. There's, somebody that's, we talked about work-life balance. We talked about, all of the, the things that were really important to me. And at that time in my life, in my career, I stopped being a people pleaser and I started being a Subrina pleaser, if that makes sense. And I was just like, you know what, I have boundaries, and I need to know, like, I need to be in a place where I feel safe, where my mental health feels safe. And, because there's been times, and I'm so thankful, to have moments where I was in positions or companies where I didn't feel that, because I understand when I get that, how precious it is. And it's really from a place of gratitude. Like I tell you all the time, you are great. you know, and the team, everybody's very nice, very complimentary, very kind, which is really important. I remember when I started, I felt like it was a big hug. Everybody was really sweet. Everybody was really nice. And it was just like, you know what, as nice as everybody is treating me, they only deserve that plus more from me. You know what I mean? And you know what, not everybody is the most technical, right? Not everybody, everybody has different gifts, right? I'm not there selling on the phone all day. I'm not there kind of, thinking of creative marketing campaigns. I'm not there in customer success dealing with angry customers, right? So, they all have their cross to bear. So why not, when you're talking to them, you treat people with respect. That's number one. You always treat them with kindness. And I never want people, people tend to say, oh, I feel so dumb, or I should know this. And I'm like, no, you're not. And you shouldn't feel that way. And I'm here to help you. I can't. And, one of the biggest things is, when I stopped being a people pleaser, right? I'm very, and people don't really, you probably know this, but a lot of people probably wouldn't believe this about me, but I'm very confrontational. So like, if I think that but not where I'm like, hey, let's fight, or, let's argue, but where if I think there's a problem, I'm going to state what I think the problem is. And, we'll talk it through, but, respectfully, our art calls it healthy conflict, but it is, right? And you need to have it. So even in these difficult conversations, everybody, deserves respect. Everybody deserves kindness, and they deserve not to feel like they're doing something wrong, because they're not. You know what I mean? They're trying their hardest, and then I'm there to kind of help and assist them with that. And it's honestly my pleasure to do it, because, I don't like to rush people. There's no stupid questions in my book. You know what I mean? And I have lots of questions. You know that. I work for you. I'm always like, what about this? Because I want to make sure I understand everything correctly. So, and you know what? Also, with implementations and change, it's hard, right? Change is really hard for people. And I think that, the biggest thing is, like, for 95% of the people, they're not the ones getting to make the change, right? They have to abide by the change. So why not be collaborative with them? Why not work with them? Why not talk? Even though you can't like, if a new tool is coming down or a new policy is coming down or something like that, you can't change that's happening. You could kind of make the flow or the implementation or the transition a little bit easier. And that's what I try to do. And I really try to listen to everybody, frontliner, management, upper management. They all have the same voice, to me. And I really, sometimes even if you can't change what's happening, sometimes just talking it through helps people through, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think you've hit on a few important things. So like, a gratitude practice, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes when things are new, we appreciate them. And then we start to accept whatever this is as a status quo. Mm-hmm. And then when it's the status quo, somehow our gratitude for it, or our thankfulness about it, or our joy over it diminishes somewhat. And so I try to give myself little reminders about that. Like when I first moved into this house, it's going to sound so silly, but one of the things that I'm really grateful for is that I have cold water in the door of my refrigerator. In my old place, I did not have that. And I didn't have a washer and dryer and a number of other things that actually make my life so much better. So I try to do these little things. So I have something small on the refrigerator that reminds me, and every time I go there, to get like cold water, or it has even crushed and cubed ice. And I love crushed ice. I really do. I'm a crushed ice girl. Or those little round ice pellets that you get at some restaurants.
Yeah.
I try to really pay attention. Like when restaurants have those, I just sit in like gratitude that I'm about to have like the best ice ever. But I really try to just appreciate every single time I get to do that, because I was so overjoyed to have it in the first place. And I want to hold on to that overjoyed feeling. And there's actually science behind that. Like if you train your neural pathways to constantly be recognizing these things that you just appreciate, or that make you happy, or that make your life a little bit better, or whatever. And then you just continuously remind yourself about them, then you actually build like joy pathways in your brain that can light up like when you're excited. And I feel like you've probably maybe naturally, done that, the more that you're like a person who's very in the moment often. And because you are curious, you're attentive and you're paying attention to what people are saying or doing, or you're receiving all of that. And then that just naturally also, makes it easier to work with people, and it keeps you from getting into some of the traps. Like when people get resistant to change, or they're getting grouchy or whatever, sometimes we take that personally, but it's really not. It has to do with whatever the thing is, right? And by listening, you've come up with so many better solutions over time for people. Like there's times where I'm like broad brush, I want to have this over with. So I'm like, okay, let's just do this. That should be fine. It works fine. And then you'll take the time and you'll really understand, like, what are the needs, what's going on? What are they saying back? And then you'll come back and you'll be like, actually, like, they need the following 3 things. So this is going to be a better option. And then it just works so much smoother. And I feel like that's such an important characteristic of leadership, curiosity, and it gets you out of so many traps.
It does. And it's giving people a voice, right? Just giving them a voice. And even because, again, perfection is the enemy of good, right? So we're not looking to make like your life perfect. I'm not looking, and your life will never be perfect. There's always going to be something.
You promised me. You promised.
Yeah, your life will never happen. But, just kind of like, hey, Subrina, could you make that font like look like this, or can you do this? Or, I've met with the team and, they're giving me this feedback. Would this tweak be okay? And, most of the time we can make some tweaks, and sometimes we can't. And then I'll say, listen, I know that you really want that, but, unfortunately we're not able to do it at this time, but I'll keep it, as a future, on the list, or, sometimes it's just not possible. Right. And, I let them know, and they appreciate that. Right. Because they don't want to just be like, yes to death either. And then I don't believe in, things falling on deaf ears. Right. So like, I believe when somebody asks me for something, you follow up, and it's either going to be yes or no. Right. Sometimes things take a little bit more time or whatever, but and then again, it's just that showing people respect, like no matter what their position, and taking the time. Right. Because again, for in your role, right, you're very busy. It's very fast paced, and you're really trying, because you're looking at the health of the whole entire company, right? So, I call you like the visionary, right? So you're like, okay, this is the vision. You are, all of the, executive management, right? And like, I am the executioner. Is that even the right word? No, I execute.
Like, you could be the executioner. You're like killing you with a smile.
I'm killing people. Or how about this in better terms, in slightly less silly terms? Like I'm much more tactical than strategic. I'm learning though to be more strategic, and that's a growth area for me. And you and I have talked about that in a long time. But yeah, it's just when the employees, when anybody just feels like they have a say, or anything, it's very important. And I'm very passionate about it, and I want the transition for anything to be as smooth and easy as possible if I can help it.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit earlier too about being confrontational in like a respectful, positive way. Yeah. How important has that been for you? Because at the end of the day, you are a woman in a technical role, and oftentimes those roles are dominated by men, or you're a woman who's telling in some cases, like, executives, like the old IT joke, the problem is between the screen and the chair, right? You're the problem, it's you. And you have to find like kind ways of telling people that you just don't know what you're doing, or whatever. And oftentimes the people you're saying this to, they're male executives, right? Or like in a different power position than you and everything. So not only are you in a more junior role, but you're a woman in a more junior role or whatever, and you're having to tell people like, hey, you've got to do it this way now, or security demands that you do this, or you're doing it wrong, or whatever.
Yeah.
So what's your experience of that been?
Oh, lots. Lots. I'm quite often the only female in the room, and I'm quite often the only minority in the room. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, right? So, but I own it, right? Like, and I will say 99% of the time I'm treated with the utmost respect. And I appreciate that. I will say that because I think even though, you know, we have a long way to go and there's still so much that we need to do you know, in terms of diversity and, you know, women and minority women and all of that. I personally have not felt, again, 99% of the time. There's been some times, right? And, you know, sometimes I have to know, you know, when I can say things and when I can't, right? I have to read the room, which, you know, is unfortunate, right? Because you kind of want to just be your true self at all times. But, you know, as you learn and grow with groups of people, you know, I won't go into too much detail, but, you know, we were working with consultants for a long time. And when I first got in the room working with them, very nice, very respectful, very kind, but I myself did not feel very knowledgeable in the area. And I took it upon myself to really learn, really like throw myself into, you know, IT and all of this stuff. And I'm not perfect by any means, but you know, I really wanted to, you know, understand what I was doing. So like I can show up for the meetings. I don't want to just sit in the corner and not speak. So that was very important to me. And, you know, the best advice I've ever gotten, well, some of the best advice I've ever gotten, because I've gotten a lot, but is ask the question, right? I remember I was in a room with a VP who was a woman, and we were in this technical meeting and nobody knows what anybody is saying. And she looks at the person speaking and she was like, "Can you please explain that to me in layman's terms?" And it was like, oh my God. Like she didn't sit there and just like yes them to death. She sat there and she asked them, she's like, "I don't understand what you're saying and I need some clarification." And that changed, honestly, it changed my whole life, like in an office environment. So now if I don't understand something, I will ask the question. I don't fear looking dumb. I don't fear, you know, and I'll ask it with authority. I'm like, "I actually don't understand what you just said. And when I leave this meeting, I know I'm going to have an action item. And if I don't fully understand what you're saying, I am not going to be able to execute. I'm not going to be able to do this." Right. And that's not going to happen. If I don't understand what I'm doing and I do it wrong, and because I wouldn't ask a question. So it's weird. And I say this and I don't mean to sound not sympathetic, but I'm not anxious in these situations, right? I don't really have anxiety around it. And so because like you can think whatever you want about me. At the end of the day, I'm going to do my job and I'm going to do it really well. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Even if I don't know exactly how to do it right now, I'm going to figure it out. I'm a use my resources, you know, kind of person. And I don't mean that to sound cocky or whatever. It's just really, I know my worth, I know my value. So it's really speaking up. And even in these rooms, when you don't understand what they're saying, clarifying and things like that, you know, it's okay to do. But listen, it's not easy. Like 20 years ago, I could not do that. Right. It took 10 to 15 years of being in rooms and, you know, feeling like you just have to sit back. Right. To then realize like, you know what, how am I going to grow? How am I going to do anything if I don't speak up, if I don't understand what I'm doing? I'm going to, you know, I'm going to do a crappy job. Right. And then how is that going to affect my growth or, you know, this whole project for this, you know what I'm saying? So
yes,
just speak up.
Yeah. And I think it's incumbent on, you know, workplaces to try to create environments where people feel comfortable speaking up, but not everybody has the luxury of being in those. And at the end of the day, you got to just, like you were saying, you got to just do it. Obviously, I'm an outspoken woman as well.
Well,
and I've been, you know, I like to say like, you know, as born in 75. So I like to say, you know, like speaking my mind or being loud since 1975, like really that's true. I mean, I really, I don't know exactly where that comes from, whether it's, you know, genetic or something else, but that's been such an important unlock
Yeah.
for me.
And I want to thank you for that too, because, you know, you're in meetings, you're asking these questions, you'll the same thing. If there's something that you don't understand, you'll ask for clarification. You really go into these meetings and you command a room. And I tell you that all the time, you light it up. And I really, you know, I look to you and I look at a lot of the ways that you handle certain situations, even though we might be in, it might be a different situation for me, or it's a different, you know, whatever. But then I look to, you know, I'm like, you know what? I know how Kathleen would handle this, you know, and I respect you so much. And, you know, you know, it's been great just, again, having this leadership and having somebody that believes in you so much, that you don't have to be a fly on the wall in the meeting. You don't have to be afraid to speak up. You know, you've never said in a meeting afterwards, Subrina, I wish you didn't say that. Subrina, I wish you didn't speak up. I wish, you know, I didn't want to send that message or whatever. You know what I mean? You never once, right? And I appreciate that.
Well, and I think as leaders, that's because we shouldn't be trying to manage the message.
Right.
People's truth is their truth, even when it's like inconvenient, or there are certain times like when there's external facing things that I would rather position things a certain way in front of a partner. And so there will be times like where people on my team, I'm like, oh, like we could have done a better job framing this up or handing it over or managing this meeting to the outcome that we were trying to get to, instead of spending so much time on, you know, maybe some little silly issue or something like that. But ultimately, I think it's really important as leaders. And I've seen both sides of this, where it's, yes, trying to set up the conditions for success and for productive conversations, and to have like a decision-making and kind of communication framework that people can use, particularly when they're in difficulty with each other. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't be trying to manage the message, because that belongs to everybody.
Yeah.
It really does. And I think that's, you know, like you were saying, I think that's super important. But yeah, I mean, asking questions is a brilliant way to find your way out of difficulty too, because when they're genuinely asked questions, and when you don't have anxiety around it, because people do have mirror neurons. So unfortunately, sometimes the worst outcomes that we're like thinking of in our head and trying to like manage so they don't show on our faces or whatever, people are going to mirror back to us.
Yeah.
So that's why, you know, this persistent positivity that you have works so well, because people can't help, especially over time of working with you, but reflect that back to you. And I've been thinking a lot, like Brene Brown talks about this, and even in his own way, like Martin Luther King Jr. talked about this, and I think he's the personification of it, but it's soft front, strong back.
Yeah.
Right? Like I stand for something. I stand for a bunch of some things. I have, you know, certain things that I, you know, have faith in, I have belief in, and that I want, you know, to show, but I don't need to armor myself. Right. I need to receive what's happening and, you know, sort of be present, ask lots of questions, understand where other people are coming from, and then invite them in to all of this goodness. And I think that you, like I said, I think you do that naturally. And I love that. So if you were, you know, somebody just getting started and wanting to, you know, have a career like yours or whatever, other than all of the amazing nuggets of advice you've provided, what's the last thing you would leave them with?
Oh gosh, the last thing that I would leave them with is, you know, it's tough, right? Because you have to have these experiences, right? You have to kind of be in a place where you're uncertain and you feel low, and you really have to learn how to like overcome that. And it's just, it's difficult, especially in the beginning part of your career. I would say just really own who you are, right? If you understand it, own it. If you don't understand it, own it. Be accountable for who you are. You know, we make mistakes. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've sat in a meeting with you and I was like, Kathleen, I'm sorry, I dropped the ball here, right? Like here's my solution. Here's my solution for me dropping the ball, right? I think if we do this, 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 and this, and then what are your thoughts around that, right? If you have a problem, you bring a solution, always, right? Even if the solution is not, you know, the right one or the one that ultimately gets picked, you always at least come to the table with something. But yeah, just be accountable, right? Like it's okay to make a mistake. I feel like because I am accountable in those situations, and I'm willing to take, like, listen, I'll take it. Like I'll take the L on this one, right? I think that's what has led to my success, right? When you try to hide things, or when you don't want to own things, or, it's, and I'm not in competition with anybody but myself. Right. So, but starting out is hard, but just really just ask the questions, take accountability from jump, and where you go, you'll be surprised at the places you'll go.
I love that. Perfect. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much again for having me. And thanks.